Why did Sauron have such an undisciplined army? Why did his orcs keep killing each other? When Pippin is captured by Uruk-hai at Parthgarlan, he expects to be killed or tortured. Instead, he watches something stranger. The orcs start killing each other. Not over him, not over orders, over ancient tribal hatreds they can't control. Before they even reach Isengard, half the company is dead from infighting. This isn't an isolated incident. At Cirith Ungol, the entire garrison slaughters itself while Frodo lies unconscious upstairs. Not because of strategy or tactics, but because orcs from Minas Morgul hate orcs from the tower, and neither can stop themselves from attacking. Sauron commanded the largest military force in Middle-earth. His armies outnumbered the Free Peoples 10-1. He should have won easily, but his own soldiers kept murdering each other. And here's what makes this absolutely critical to understand. This wasn't a flaw in Sauron's plan. It was inevitable, because of what orcs actually are, because of how they were created, because of a contradiction built into their very nature that even Sauron couldn't solve. This is why Sauron's army was undisciplined, and the answer reveals something disturbing about evil itself. Let's start with the most extreme example, Cirith Ungol, where an entire garrison destroyed itself. After Shelob paralyzes Frodo, the orcs from the tower find him. They take him inside, strip him, and begin arguing about his mithril coat. Then orcs from Minas Morgul arrive, claiming Frodo as their prize since he was found in their territory. Tolkien describes what happens next in The Return of the King. There was the sound of fighting. Shagrat came out of the tower, and he had a bundle. He ran right past Sam, up the stairs. Then Gorbug's voice shouting. He came out, running. But a spear got him as he ran past. He fell right on top of me. Sam climbs the tower and finds it silent. Bodies everywhere. The entire garrison dead or fled. Over a shirt. This seems insane. These are Sauron's elite troops, guarding the most strategic pass into Mordor. And they butchered each other over loot, while the prisoner they were supposed to be guarding lay forgotten upstairs. But here's the thing. From the orcs' perspective, they weren't being irrational. Shagrat's company from the tower hated Gorbug's company from Minas Morgul, with a hatred so deep they literally couldn't stop themselves from fighting. Even knowing Sauron would punish them, even knowing it undermined their mission, the hatred was stronger than discipline, stronger than orders, stronger than self-preservation. To understand why, we need to understand what orcs actually are. And this is where Tolkien himself struggled. He changed his mind about orc origins multiple times, because every version created theological problems. In the Silmarillion, orcs are corrupted elves, captured by Morgoth in the ancient past, and twisted through torture and dark sorcery. But this created a problem. If they're corrupted elves, they have immortal souls. Can they be redeemed? Are they evil by choice or by nature? Tolkien found this disturbing. In later writings, he suggested they might be corrupted men, or soulless beasts given speech, or even beings animated by the spirits of Mina Maiar. But here's what remained consistent across all versions. Orcs were made by Morgoth through corruption. They were not created, they were ruined. This is crucial. Morgoth, and later Sauron, could not create life. Only Eru Ilúvatar could do that. So Morgoth took something that already existed and broke it, twisted it, turned it into something that hated its own existence. And that self-hatred, that fundamental wrongness, was built into every orc from the beginning. Tolkien writes in Morgoth's Ring, "The orcs were beasts of humanized shape, but they were not inhabited by souls." But then he contradicts himself elsewhere, suggesting they must have souls because they have language and choice. He never resolved this. What he did make clear is that orcs hate. They hate their enemies. They hate their masters. They hate each other. And most of all, they hate themselves. So why didn't Sauron just fix this? He's a Maya, one of the Ainur, nearly as powerful as the Valar themselves. Why couldn't he impose discipline on his own army? Because of what orcs fundamentally are. Corrupted beings driven by will, not programmed servants. When Morgoth created orcs, he gave them enough independence to think, to speak, to choose, because he needed them to be soldiers, not mindless automatons. They needed to adapt to battlefield conditions, to make tactical decisions, to function without constant oversight. But that independence came with a cost. They could choose to disobey. They could choose to hate each other. They could choose immediate gratification over long-term strategy. Sauron tried multiple approaches to solve this. First, he used fear. The orcs were terrified of him. Gorbag says in The Two Towers, "But when he comes, you'd better go doubled over and quick." They knew what would happen if they failed. But fear only works when the master is watching. The moment Sauron's attention was elsewhere, the orcs reverted to their nature. Second, he created hierarchies. The Uruk-hai were larger, stronger, able to endure sunlight. They were meant to dominate lesser orcs and enforce discipline. But the Uruks despised the smaller orcs, and the smaller orcs resented the Uruks. The hierarchy just created more divisions. Third, he kept them constantly at war. Orcs were most unified when they had external enemies to hate. But the moment they weren't actively fighting the free peoples, they turned on each other. Sauron couldn't solve the fundamental problem. Orcs were created through corruption, and corruption doesn't create loyalty. It creates resentment, hatred, and the desire to destroy. Tolkien gives us multiple examples of this playing out. When the Uruk-hai capture Merry and Pippin, the company is mixed. Uruks from Isengard under Ugluk, orcs from Mordor under Grishnak, and smaller orcs from Moria. They immediately start fighting over what to do with the prisoners. Ugluk wants to take them to Isengard, as Saruman ordered. Grishnak wants to search them for something he suspects they're carrying. The Moria orcs just want to eat them. Tolkien writes, Ugluk shouted, and a number of other orcs of nearly his own size ran up. Then suddenly, without warning, Ugluk sprang forwards, and with 2 swift strokes swept the heads off 2 of his opponents. That's the leader of the company decapitating his own soldiers. Not enemies, his own troops. Because they questioned his orders. And even after this display of violence, the company keeps fracturing. Grishnak tries to steal the hobbits. The Moria orcs desert during the night. By the time the Rohirrim attack, Ugluk's company has already lost 1/3 of its strength to internal conflict. This pattern repeats everywhere. At the Battle of Pelennor Fields, when the Rohirrim charge, the orcs break and run. Not because they're militarily defeated, but because their morale collapses instantly. Without Sauron's will directly driving them forward, they have no cohesion, no loyalty to each other, nothing to make them stand and fight. After Sauron falls, the reaction is even more extreme. The Return of the King describes, the orcs reeled, wavered, and broke. They fled to hide in holes and dark, lightless places. They don't try to fight on. They don't retreat in order. They scatter like animals, each one thinking only of its own survival. So Sauron had the largest army in Middle-earth, but it was fundamentally unreliable. And he knew it. This is why he relied so heavily on fear, on the Nazgul, on his own direct will projected through the Palantiri and through Barad-dûr itself. He couldn't trust his orcs. He could only dominate them. And the moment his attention wavered, they fell apart. This reveals something profound about Tolkien's understanding of evil. Evil cannot create, it can only corrupt. And corruption is inherently unstable. Morgoth couldn't create orcs from nothing, so he twisted existing beings. But that twisting left them broken, filled with self-hatred, incapable of genuine loyalty or cooperation. Sauron inherited this problem from his master, and never solved it. The Free Peoples had smaller armies, but they fought for something real: their homes, their families, their freedom. That gave them cohesion that no amount of fear could replicate. The orcs fought because they were forced to, because they feared Sauron more than they feared death. But they didn't fight for each other. They didn't have brotherhood or loyalty, or any bond that could hold them together when things got difficult. This is why the undisciplined army was inevitable. Sauron could breed bigger orcs, smarter orcs, orcs that could endure sunlight. But he couldn't make them not hate each other, because that hatred was fundamental to what they were. Corrupted beings, twisted into service, but never truly loyal. At Cirith Ungol, the garrison destroyed itself over a mithril shirt. At Parth Galen, the Uruks murdered their own troops over orders. At the Black Gate, the moment Sauron fell, the entire army scattered in terror, not because they were defeated, but because nothing held them together except fear. And when the source of that fear vanished, so did any pretense of discipline. That's why Sauron's army was undisciplined, not because he was a poor commander, but because he was working with fundamentally broken material. Orcs were corruption given form, and corruption, by its very nature, turns on itself. Sauron commanded hundreds of thousands of soldiers, but he never truly had an army. He had a mob held together by terror, ready to collapse the moment that terror faltered. And in the end, that's exactly what happened.